Today I'm showing you an MCP client feature called Elicitation, and I'm going to walk through an MCP server example that I've created to demonstrate this. And we'll see how it works on the client side. I'm going to test this out with Claude Desktop and with VS Code and with the Model Context Protocol Inspector, so we can see actually how this feature works and why it's so useful. Super useful feature, and I can't wait till more MCP clients support this so that we can use this and start having this experience with our language models. If you're already familiar with this feature and you just want to see the Python code, you can skip to that point using the timestamps in the video description. But I'm going to start by looking at the Model Context Protocol documentation. By the way, I'm teaching AI engineering here on Zazen Codes, and you can sign up for my newsletter if you want to get notified every week when I upload a new video. And when you sign up for this newsletter, you'll get some free digital downloads that I'm going to send you, including this Zen guide for data developers, which I think is really special and I really enjoy it. So I'd recommend reading through that and consider bringing some of these practices into your work. Now on to elicitation. There's 3 steps in the elicitation flow. We start with this server initiating an elicitation, then we go to a human interaction phase, and then we complete that request. So step by step, starting with from the MCP server, this will be during the runtime of a tool call, for example. It can elicit for information. It'll ask the client, like Claude Desktop is an MCP client, and it'll say, hey, we're looking for some more information from the user. It'll pause until it gets that information. The client will pass that request on to the user, and it will say, hey user, can I have this information? You as the user will input that information, and then that will get sent through the client to the server, who can continue processing. That's the flow. And then this elicitation.create, this kind of event right here, I'm going to show you where that comes into play. So this would be a structured data request example from elicitation. And this is something the server is going to send to the client. And the method name is elicitation/create. And in this case, we're saying, please provide your contact information. And the schema is that we're looking for a name that's a string and an email. And so we can be able to ask for very specific data that fits a very specific spec, like a string or a number. And so after the user has given their data, this is how the response might go from the client back to the server. So Claude Desktop will package this data up that's been provided and send it back to the server, including, notice this field called action, where in this case the value is accept, and content has been packaged up to send over there. And I'll just come up here, and I just want to note that we're not explicitly asking for this action field. We're asking for these properties like inside of here that we're part of this content below, but the action is something different. It's like going to be a default kind of object that gets returned inside of this response. And we'll see this referenced when we implement this with Python. And I'm also going to mention the version. So we're looking at the spec dated to June 18th. But if I was to look at a later version of the spec, see how we're under client features, we have elicitation here. Now let me go to like March, and now client features doesn't have that anymore. So this was new in that version of the spec. That's when it appeared. And as a side note, I really love how the Model Context Protocol does this with their spec. Like most things, Model MCP, this is, to me, a really great choice, how they've sort of set this up. There's even a draft version, which might be different than the latest version. I'll be demonstrating elicitation using FastMCP, which is a Python library for writing MCP servers. And the way we're going to do it is with code like this. We're going to say something like context.elicit, and I'll ask for some specific information, and we're awaiting this. So this is an async thing where the script holds on this, like when we're executing this tool, it holds on this line before continuing. Now let's get to the demonstration. I've got this source code for a book by demo MCP server, and this is inside of this MCP Elicitation folder in Zazen Codes Season 2. So I'll link to that in the video description. You can check it out. And I'm just going to open up Vim and go into this server. This is the code we'll be talking about and working on. I'm going to build this out a little bit, but I'm not going to walk through this yet because I want to just demonstrate how it works. I want to show you though, at the bottom, we're running it. So I have this mcp.run, and this happens when we run this script. So when name equals main, this only gets triggered when we're actually running this server, like Python server.py. We run it, and this gets triggered right here. So we're serving this stuff. Like all these tools are going to start serving when we run this script. For example, let me show you this. So I'm going to go into book by demo, and then I have this py v right here, and this is alias to a virtual environment I have for running Python scripts. I could also reference that with the full path. I could open up Python there. This thing has some stuff installed. It's in this ad hoc virtual environment that has access to FastMCP. So that means I can use it to run scripts that have FastMCP as a dependency. For example, I can run this script right here. So it's called server. So I'm just going to do this and then server, and this will start serving. So this MCP server is now serving on standard input output. Now, I don't want to run the server in this way. I want to get an MCP client to run the server for me. I'm going to do that with Claude desktop application. I've got this little helper function CMCP, which is aliased to this. You can find that in my .files repository on GitHub, or ask me about it on Discord or something. So CMCP, go in here, and right here I've got my MCP servers configured. I've got some other stuff going on here, but this is what I want to focus on for this video. This is the book by demo. This one looks at this server up here, the thing we just ran. And this is the absolute path to that server. So anywhere on my computer, I can run this and open this file. If I just, if I wanted to open it anywhere, oh, okay, right, so it's the wrong path. Cool. Okay, let's fix that. So inside of book by demo, where are we? We're right here, and this gives us access to server, so I need to fix this. So I'm gonna remove that. This is the absolute path, and then this is gonna be my absolute path to the Python. So Python, run the server, that's what we wanna do. Let me get rid of this noodle thing. Open up Claude. We have this book by demo, and I have a list books and a buy books. What books for sale? It's calling list books. Got a bunch of books, and it's telling me, let's buy this Hyperion. I tried to read this one time. Okay, buy Hyperion. Now it's going to trigger the other function called buy book. But look at this, error calling tool buy book, method not found. It's not working. What's going on with that? The reason is because Claude Desktop, it does not support elicitation at time of filming. It's possible by the time you're watching this, it will. It certainly will very soon. So I need to test this server out with a client that does support elicitation, and VS Code Insiders does. So you can download the special Insiders edition of Visual Studio Code, and you can use their, what's it called? Their GitHub Copilot. It took me a little bit to get used to, but you can open up these configuration settings. By the way, I should get my keycaster going. So I do this command, Shift Command P to open this up, and I can list my MCP servers, and I've got this guy, this book demo right here, but it stopped. But where did that come from? Let me show you. So MCP, if I say open user configuration, that will get me to my configuration part where I can, configure these MCP servers for this guy, for VS Code Insiders, and what's he called again? Copilot, for Copilot. So look at this command. It's the same thing. I have this absolute path to my Python, and then I have the absolute path to my server. However, I guess I changed it. Let me just make sure this is correct now. And now let's try and ask something. I'm gonna pick a model as well. I want a good tool calling model, so Sonnet 3.5 should do a good job. What books do you have? Yep, enable this. It doesn't have access to books. Seems overall quite confused. And the reason why is we need to add this with the hash command. And when I do that, we'll see this pop up. So I've got this book demo, buy book. There should be a list books. There it is, list books. This is a function I defined in my MCP server. I'm just going to say list books. I won't even say anything. And this should cause that to be called. So it's trying to call list books from my MCP server. Excellent. Now let's try and buy Hyperion again. Buy Hyperion using buy book. I actually kind of like this interface of explicitly requesting the tool we want to call. It's interesting. So now it's trying to call this, and it's passing in the title of Hyperion. And look at this, request for input. Price for Hyperion is $18, accept to continue to shipping options. All right, I'm going to say yes. So it sent that back, and now it's going to the next elicitation step. choose a shipping location. All right, I'll respond. Let's say Toronto, Ontario. And now it seems to be broken. It wants one of these available options, but now it's totally stopped the flow. And this, I guess, has something to do with my server. So we're going to need to work on this and improve it a bit, but I'm sure you're curious how it works. So let me finally get to that step. And we're going to talk through this server completely. Then we'll go back to VS Code and test it again after I've made some improvements to it. All this stuff at the top is just defining data, like what books we have for sale, what locations we support for shipping. And these are some utility functions that are also not interesting. Here's the interesting stuff. There's two tools available, and this list books tool doesn't do anything to do with elicitation. So we're going to skip right over it. But this is the basic format for FastMCP tools. It takes this mcp.tool decorator, which if I come up, this was defined up here where we instantiated our MCP object with FastMCP, very similar to FastAPI, the Python library. Right, so this just returns a dictionary, which is just this guy, and that's it. That's how that one works. It doesn't take in any data. I'm passing in context here. I really shouldn't be doing that. It doesn't take in any arguments from the user. It doesn't expect anything. It doesn't take anything. Now this one here, this I also pass in context, but now we're using this. And I take an argument. So I set that argument after the context, and this context object, if I come down here, this is how the elicitation is working. The way we do elicitation is in this way. We go from this context that's been injected, we're going to call the elicit function on that. And we can set specific message that we want it to pass to the user. And we can ask for a certain type of response. And here we're asking for a string response from the user. And then notice down in the next line, we're waiting for this. So this line will hang until we've got our elicitation response, and then we'll go to the next line down here, and we'll check the result of the elicitation action right here, .action. And you might remember I said how action was one of those fields that's always included in the elicitation response from the Model Context Protocol spec. Anyway, that response, the way FastMCP works is you can just access those fields with this dot notation. And we're going to check if that string is in some of these lists, is in one of these lists. And if it's not one of those values, we'll keep going. Now let's get our hands on this and kind of mess around with this. Now this is a pretty bad user experience because we're kind of like forcing the user to set one of those things. So here's a better pattern for this. If we want to just do like a yes/no type question, we can do it like this. We can set the response type equals to none. So we don't actually expect a response. We just want to make sure that the result is to accept that. So let me implement that pattern. And I'm going to set this to none. And I'm just going to say if this, but we'll say if not price.action, then that means we didn't accept it. User rejected the price. That looks a lot cleaner. Now let's go down to the next time we do elicitation. Right down here, and this is for choosing a shipping location. It would be another reasonable step in buying a book. And here we're asking for a string, which is the shipping location. But if it's not a valid location, I'm just saying, I'm just throwing an error. I'd much rather give the user a list of all of the different valid locations in here. And so what I can do is I can say shipping location response. Let's model this as a shipping location response object. This is going to be a class. And inside of here, we're going to have a location field. And this is going to be a literal with all the different options of potential shipping locations. And up here, this has to be a data class, which I'm going to have to import. From data classes, I'll import data class. And this is how we can do things. Now this literal thing, for now, I could just say that that's a string. And now this will keep working the same way. So this putting string in here was kind of like a shorthand for doing this. This is the more verbose way of doing it, but also now we're going to need to reference the location from that response if we do this. And I'm going to say if it's not in the locations, we can raise this invalid locations error. But an even more advanced way is to actually use this literal. So literal comes like this, from typing import literal, and literal means it's going to be one of the following options kind of thing. So these are all the options right here, like Toronto, Canada, Vancouver. Let's grab these and let's say locations literal, and it's going to be like this. Okay, and then down here, let's try some Vim stuff. So I'm gonna, okay, GV, okay, we're gonna go like replacing anything from the semicolon, oh man, semicolon on to the end. I'm gonna get rid of it, except I wanna replace it with a comma. That's what we wanna do. And down here, I'm pretty happy with myself that I just pulled that one off. All right, so not that it's anything special, just like, I'm not using Vim as much these days. Nice. So this is this locations literal that I called it. Again, this naming convention, whatever, I don't know if you want to use that or not, but down here, wherever we have location, this one, I wanted this to be the type. So this will be a literal type. It'll be one of the following options. That's what we expect. The user better give me one of those things. Now, continuing on, we're going to use elicitation a couple more times. Then I'm going to rerun this and show you. Actually, just one time more. And this is for the final accept. Like, should we accept or reject this action? And this is another yes/no situation. So I'm just going to say the response type is none. And we're going to say if not action, then the user rejected the order. I think that should work fine. Now I want to test this again. But I'm not going to test this with VS Code Insiders Edition. I'm going to test this with the Model Context Protocol Inspector. So how we do this is we run this with npx. So we need to have Node installed, and we run npx Model Context Protocol Inspector. This runs a Node library as a one-off like sort of run, and so it'll download the necessary dependencies and then run this thing for us. And this expects an argument. The argument needs to be what our MCP server is. The argument needs to be how to run our MCP server. But actually, we don't need to specify an argument. I can just launch this thing up, and it'll spin up. Here it is. And now I can configure my MCP server inside of here, right? So I've actually already got my Python environment loaded up. This is like the right Python version to run the server. And down here with the argument, I gotta make sure this path is fixed because I changed it at some point. So again, I'll just pwd that thing, copy this. Let's get out of here and make sure this path is correct. And then it's called server.py. And I'm going to connect to this. So it's connected. We've also got it attached to the server logs themselves down here, but I didn't write any sort of logging functionality, so we're not going to see anything in there. But what we will see is some tools. So let me list those. I got list books. Let's try it out. So I'll click that, come over here, and I can run it. And it runs right away, and I get all the books in my store. Now let's try and buy one. This is going to be the interesting part. I know that Dune is for sale here. Let's try and buy that one. And look at this. It bounced me over here to this elicitation section. So I was in tools. It put me over here, and I've got a little notification. So I need to answer this. The price for Dune is this. Accept to continue. All right. How do I accept? I'm gonna just submit an empty response, and so it bounced me back here, and I have running. So it's like running, but look at this. I have this elicitation request. Let me go back to it, and now it's asking me for a shipping location response. And so I have a form. Oh my God, I have a form with my options, and that's because of that literal, how I did that over in FastMCP. I'm going to pick Toronto. That's where I live, and I'll accept that. Okay, it took me back to tools, and I'm not getting an elicitation request. It's given me an error. Buy book, accepted elicitation object has no attribute location. Okay, so I screwed up my code. And this is what the inspector is so good for, right? We're going to be able to actually test our server. Let me show you that. I'm going to come back to my code. We'll have to fix this somehow. So it was where I said location, and I thought we could just access that with a shorthand. I tried to just take that from the response, but that did not work. Here's the documentation. So I've implemented something like this. That's my pattern. And notice down here, we're looking at the data. So I say user equals result.data, and then from that I get user name. So I need to access the data property if I want to get the location. Data, and this should fix that. Oh, I see. I forgot to update this part of the code, which is stupid. Okay, chosen location better be first. And we're going to location like this. And then this should just be chosen location right here. Like that. Okay. And this now will come down here. And this should be a string. And so we'll properly get our shipping quote with this. All right. One more time. And coming to elicitations, I'll grab my location. Let's go to Vancouver. And now I know it's working because it's still running. And over here, I've got a flag for my final order summary. Book Neuromancer, shipped to Vancouver. And I can click submit. And that should be complete. So the tool ran successfully and it returned this object. So this output we see here, like the order ID and all the information, this is what we're going to see at the bottom of our script. So if I go down to the bottom, have a look at this, like that, this is our stuff. This is what it just output to us because we got through all of these elicitation steps. Now, one gotcha about the Model Context Protocol Inspector is in the settings. This elicitation is not going to work unless you have your request timeout set high enough. So my default request timeout kept giving me errors, so I just bumped this up to be 100,000. And then once I did that, I was able to test this with no problems. So that's a really important thing that you look at when you start testing elicitations. And I'd also like to demonstrate this again over in VS Code, but I think it's probably a good idea to close this down and reopen it up. So having done that, I'll open up a new chat and let's try and buy a book. Snow Crash is another book I like. Let me buy this. Buy Snow Crash. I wonder what this is all about, this weird logging I'm getting. Continue. I'm also hearing a notification. That's pretty cool. Okay, I've responded and immediately it's given me the next. So this was the respond without a user input. This one is what gave me the option. Okay, I got a drop down menu. That's cool. And this is my order summary. So now I'll just accept that. And we're good to go. I've placed my order for the book. That's it for the demo, and now I want to explain how I'm going to use this in my own MCP servers and how I found out about it. But first, if you like this video, then I'd appreciate it if you give me a like and consider subscribing. These things really help me out. So the reason I learned about elicitation was because I was getting GPT to generate me some code for an MCP server that I'm working on, and this MCP server is going to make API requests. But I instructed GPT, I was like, hey, before we go and make these API requests, we need to estimate the cost and present that to the user for confirmation. And I picture this being like a multi-step thing where we have a tool called Calculate Cost, and then we use prompt engineering to make sure that that tool gets triggered before we're allowed to run the tool. And there might need to be some kind of state that we're maintaining to ensure that these tools aren't run prematurely. But anyway, I noticed that the output that GPT was writing had all this elicitation stuff just written into it. I hadn't heard of it before, but I did tell it to reference the recent FastMCP documentation, which does support elicitation. And this really blew my mind. That's how I found out about it. So it's a real use case and I'm actually going to use elicitation for this, to the point where we're going to need support in our MCP clients before I can create the MCP server that I have in mind for this use case. Now, as mentioned, I'm going to link you to that video on MCP sampling, and if you have some time, you could check that out. I'll also link you to my video on FastMCP, and if you haven't seen that one, it'll get you up and running with the 3 core primitives of MCP servers. Thank you for watching, and namaste.